free tutorial video. This time around, we're going to take a quick break from some of the technical and financial modeling and valuation related lessons and go through a more qualitative topic, but something that comes up a lot, which is how to walk through your resume in investment banking and other finance related interviews. We're not going to go through our whole process, but I'm going to give you one short, simple tip to help you stand out above everyone else, something that you can apply in literally 5 minutes or less and make your pitch much better in interviews. So just to go over quickly why it's important, the resume walkthrough is really your first impression in an interview, and it's how all the interviewers you speak with are going to judge you. So if you get it right and you make a positive first impression, it's going to make the whole rest of the interview a lot easier. If you don't get it right, then you're going to face an uphill battle for the rest of the interview. In a lot of cases, based on what you say in those first few minutes, they're going to decide right then and there whether or not you get an offer. So it's very, very important to get this right, and you don't get a second chance to make a good first impression. Now, we call this process telling your story. What this really means is you are sitting in the interview room, and then they call you in, you are introduced to the interviewer, and then he asks you to tell him about yourself or to walk him through your resume or tell him why you're there today. And they're really all the same question, which is to walk through your resume and explain who you are, what you've done in the past, why you're here today, and what value you can add to their firm. So how you answer this question, we recommend this process. You start at the beginning. So normally this is where you went to school, or if you're in business school or beyond, what your background was in terms of work experience before coming to business school, or if you have a long professional history, maybe where you started out initially following graduation from an MBA program or university. Then you go into how you got interested in finance or investment banking. This is called your spark, hence the picture right here. And this is very important because this is specific and personal to you. So you shouldn't pick something generic for this. You should pick something that is very, very specific to you. Something about your family. Maybe your parents were day trading. Maybe they owned a business. Maybe you took a class and met a specific professor with an interest in a field that was related to investment banking. Something like that. Now, after your interest was sparked, you became more and more interested over time, and you developed that interest via classes, via studying, via speaking with alumni, via internships, via further job experiences. And then you conclude with saying where you're going in the future and why you're here today. So in the future, maybe your plan is to become a trusted advisor to companies in a certain industry. If that is your plan, then this firm can get you there in very specific ways because of the types of deals or clients they work with, and you can contribute to those and in the process also contribute to your own future. And that's the idea with your story. So that's the outline, and it sounds simple enough to follow, but what we find is that people tend to make quite a few of the same mistakes when telling their story. One common big mistake that we've seen a lot before is that the parts at the end, the why you're here and the future part, are both boring, for lack of a better word. So instead of giving a very colorful and lasting impression, you kind of have a bland impression at the end, a blank slate where it's something generic that a lot of other people could say the same thing for. For example, you could say something like, I want to become a trusted advisor to companies, or I want to advise on cross-border Asian US M&A deals. Now, neither one of these is bad necessarily, but the problem is that they are identical to a lot of what many other people there are going to say for their stories. So just like your spark should be specific to you and not something that a lot of other people could say, the same idea applies to the why you're here and the future part of your story. So there's a simple, easy way to fix this, which is to go back to your spark or to your beginning and link the first part of your story to the ending of your story. So just like how your spark is going to be the most memorable part of whatever you tell them, and also your beginning, possibly depending on your family background and so on, you can link those to the ending of your story to also make the ending of your story more memorable and to make them recall what you actually said in the beginning for how you initially got interested in this industry. Now, it's not just limited to your story. A lot of movies also use this technique, and I'm going to show you a few examples here just to prove to you that it does work and it's something that you see in entertainment, and your story is a form of entertainment because you have to keep their interest long enough for them to say, yes, we should give him or her a job offer or invite him or her to the next round of interviews. One example of this occurs in the movie Inception. So in the very beginning, we see a scene with this guy Saito, and then at the very end we see another scene with him. He's obviously much older, and the timeline here actually gets very confusing, but we see the same person in different times at both the very beginning and the very end of the movie. And by inserting it at the end, Christopher Nolan, the director here, has this callback to the beginning, and we compare and contrast and see the passage of time and what has happened to him over time, partially as a result of the events in this movie. Now, another example of this is in The Usual Suspects. So we start off with this kind of question about who is Kaiser Soze. And we go through the whole movie and we hear all these different stories, all these different accounts, all these tales, and then of course at the end, we go back and answer that original question in a twist ending. I hope I didn't spoil the movie for you, but this is over 20 years old or somewhere around that by now, so hopefully you've already seen it or at least know what the twist ending here was. So by inserting this type of callback to the beginning, you help people remember everything that happened, and you also make the ending more memorable by linking it back to the unique question or situation that was posed in the beginning. Now, how does this apply to your story? Forget about movies, but let's say you're pitching yourself in an investment banking or other finance interview. Well, here's a sample story, and I'm going to go through this first version and then show you how to make it better. So this person worked in technology, media, and telecom investment banking, and then their spark for private equity was that they were doing some fundraising for a private company, so maybe a private placement. And this tech company, this private tech company, there were a lot of expansion opportunities in the business. And the analyst working on the deal realized that he wanted to do more than just advise the company on this one transaction. He wanted to work with them over the long term, help build value by helping them with acquisitions, by looking at other companies in the industry and seeing if there are competitive dynamics that they could take advantage of, maybe by acquiring other companies or helping them to partner with other companies. Of course, in investment banking, you can't really do that because you normally just advise on single deals like this. So he started speaking with alumni that were in private equity, with former coworkers that were in private equity. He started studying more about LBO models and leverage buyouts on his own. And he also started trying to work on more private equity related deals. And he's here today because he wants to combine his interest and background in technology with his background in finance and eventually become a technology investor in the long term for his career. So this story is not bad. This story is actually better than a lot of what we hear from our clients and customers on both sides, but it could be better. One simple tweak that you could use to make this better is to have a callback to the spark or the beginning of the story. So here's what you might say for the ending part, for the future and the why you're here today parts at the end. He still wants to be a tech investor, but you could say something like, I want to invest in tech companies to get more opportunities like the one we had with that private company that I mentioned in the beginning of my story, to work together to add value over the long term. So you'd remind them that you had this situation where you saw this very promising company, you wanted to potentially invest in it or help them buy other companies or partner with other companies or do something like that. But in investment banking, you're too limited. You can't do it. In private equity, you can do that. You can add more value over the long term because you work with companies over many years instead. And the rest of it would still be the same. He could still point out how this bank or this PE firm rather is very strong in tech investing. But by inserting this reference back to his original spark, he makes his story more memorable, and in particular, the ending comes across as more memorable and less generic than the original version of the story. Here's another example. This story is for someone going into investment banking at the university level. So he had an economics and public policy background in university. He worked at a nonprofit one summer for a summer internship, and then at the same time he was working there, this nonprofit was in the process of merging with another nonprofit. So that sparked his interest in the field, and after that he started taking more finance classes, he started doing some self-study, he started speaking with alumni, he joined the investment club at his school, so his interest was growing all the way, and now he's going for maybe investment banking internships or a full-time role. And his story is that he wants to combine his public policy and nonprofit experience, that's what the first letters here stand for, with finance and his finance background, his newfound background, and advise in the public finance and project finance sectors, which are similar in some ways. He's presumably speaking with a banking group in one of those areas, and he wants to combine his background and advise those types of companies or those advise on those types of projects. So again, this is not a bad story, but we could make it better with a very simple tweak, which is the following. We insert another callback to his beginning and his spark. Here's what he could say instead. He wants to advise organizations that may not be as savvy about finance and M&A and deal making, like the merged nonprofit that he was working at a few years ago. So now he's inserting this callback, and he wants to become a trusted advisor to those types of public and private organizations. So it's not really that different from what was here before. There's really just the one difference of inserting this callback and saying, hey, I had this unique experience. Very few other people are going to work in a nonprofit that merge with another nonprofit and become interested in the industry as a result of that. But that's something unique to me that other people aren't going to mention. And in the future, I want to expand upon that. And when I see that again, I want to be the one actually potentially advising those types of organizations. So those are just a few examples of how you could use this strategy. In short, a very simple but effective way to improve your story is to go back to your spark or your beginning and link the beginning of your story to the ending of your story like that. It works very well in movies, and it certainly works well with your own story and how you pitch yourself and walk through your resume or CV in investment banking interviews.